Hello everyone, I'm DM Dungeon Mastery, also known as Anthony.
And I'm August from TTRPGenius.
And this is the pilot episode of the Roll for Banter podcast, where we're just going to be discussing various TTRPG topics. This pilot episode topic is going to be homebrew content versus official 5e content.
Yeah, as we were kind of looking at discussing what we'd want to do for like our pilot episode, we back and forth a few ideas, and this is something that, one, our communities know us for, and two, something that I think we both have unique experiences and takes for homebrew content. So Anthony, what are your thoughts on like homebrew versus official content? Where do you kind of stand on there, and how do you think the average DM at home would be able to implement homebrew into their campaigns?
So for official content, I will say, as a person who is really bad at remembering everything on the fly, it is kind of rough, especially as a new dungeon master, when you go to start an adventure and you want to just run it straight out of the book. You don't want to make any edits. And you flip open to the adventure, you get the long-winded paragraph introduction, and then all of the information is spaced out within the adventure chapters, and you have to pre-read the content before you start running it.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, there's sometimes they don't even specify like certain specific things in the official content that you do have to just homebrew on the fly, and it's very frustrating.
No, I completely agree. That's where like I sit with like the official content. In fact, we've talked about this before, but like that's one of my biggest pet peeves is like I go and I pick up an adventure, especially one that like I've purchased, because I'll go to like Drive-Thru-RPG and like I'll check out like the free content that they have on there, pay what you want, and you bring home this adventure and you're like super psyched. You're like, okay, this really touched me in the description. I really want to dive deep into this. And then you look into it and it's like, yeah, everything is spaced out weird. Nothing makes sense. I hate to do it to them because I really like it and I am working on a video for it, but the free first level adventure, a most potent brew, where like the first encounter you have is arguably the hardest encounter against the giant rats. The descriptions don't always match up and line up, and then the map itself, it doesn't really flow for like your second encounter, which is your second of three encounters that you get for the entire adventure. You can completely bypass that if your players decide not to open the door in front of them and open the door to the left. You know, spoiler alert. But like, yeah, it's always frustrating when you get into like the official content and some like homebrew content where it just doesn't flow right.
The flow is very important. For example, out of the Tales from the Yawning Portal,
you got the book.
There is a lot of things in this book that are very useful, and there are a lot of things that aren't very useful. One thing that I just ran recently was the Forge of Fury, and right at the beginning of the adventure, this is a spoiler alert, so if you're a player, don't watch this, but right at the beginning of the adventure, there's this large ravine right here on the map.
Mm-hmm.
And it says in this little block text that if a character falls down there, they fall into an underground lake. But it doesn't tell you where the lake goes. It doesn't tell you what happens if you fall down any other crevasse in the adventure. It just says, they fall 100 feet down into a rushing lake. And then they're just expected to probably, not survive the fall. But what if your players cast Spider Climb and they walk
or like
down
Feather
there?
Fall or something like that?
Yeah, exactly, because that's what mine did, and it doesn't specify like where do the rivers go. It just says they fall down 100 feet into a river. Okay, thanks. I guess I'm just gonna have to figure out where it goes,
and that's
on the fly. And then you're going and then you're flipping.
You're like,
frantically
is there
through the
anything
pages.
in here that tells you about this? No, absolutely. And like And there's a balance, because that's the trap I find myself falling into, is I think about everything. So like whenever I'm writing an encounter for like either my Patreon or like for like one of the people on my Discord, when I go and I'm like writing out the PDF and everything, I'm like, okay, well, what about this? What about this? What happens if they do this? Then how does that tie into this? And then it's like something that I'm like, okay, this is going to be 2 pages, turns into 4 pages. And you're like, dude, I'm not even halfway done. And I don't know where to go from here, because I was supposed to have this done like yesterday. And, you know, from your experience, we've both been running D&D games, and we've been Dungeon Masters for better part of a decade, each one of us. What do you do when you're making homebrew content to limit the amount of almost like excess that going down the rabbit hole of, okay, if I'm writing this adventure and they fall into the ravine, do you write out the entire subterranean level below the ravine? Do you just say this is a bottomless ravine? Where do you go when you're writing content?
Well, if I was the one that made the Forge of Fury, and I had something that early on in the book that is pretty relevant to things that players could do, and it's hard to just assume you can try to figure out every single pathway that player characters can do, because Dungeons and Dragons or whatever TTRPG that you're playing is not like a video game. There's no defined parameters on what they can and can't do, and then on top of that you add spells into the mix that could reshape the very landscape and allow them to walk through walls. You can't really plan for everything, but
yeah, heaven forbid a level 1 character has a ethereal nature or something like that.
If you allow it in your game, you
right.
People homebrew some race that they found on some website. Right. What I would do, Colin, I'm talking about you, Dan Wiki. That's the place where all dungeon masters cry when their players come up to them.
I found something on the wiki, and I think I should be able to play.
It seems balanced that I can do 3d12 damage at level 1.
Yeah, and I have a flying speed and like no stat below 20.
Yeah, exactly. So if I was making an adventure, I don't typically hard plan out the entire adventure, especially not at the beginning of the campaign. I try to figure out like where I want it to go, like with the ending, and then you flesh out what you need when you need it. So I'm not going to go through and make an entire dungeon in one setting, because that takes hours and hours of time. What I would rather do is, okay, this is the first area. They're going in here. What is in this area that I need to focus on right now? And then if I make a ravine or a cliff or something, most player characters aren't going to jump off a cliff that most likely leads to their death at the bottom, but
some of them will.
Some of them will. So like what you would do is just say,
forced into it.
I would at least have some sort of text that explains, like, if your character decides to do this, what happens. Not just, this is the guarantee, like, they will die if they fall off this 100-foot fall into an abyss, but you could even just at least, like, give something so that you understand what's going on. My camera's out of focus, sorry.
No, you're good. Yeah, no, actually, you brought up a good point there. That's one thing that, like, I think that when you're working on creating, like, content for or for, like, either your players or for content that you're looking at selling and anything in between, is looking at, like, the realistic possibilities, and then also planning out what's happening, so that way, regardless of what the players are doing, this is what's happening. A good example for that is, like, I play a lot of Call of Cthulhu, another great system. I highly recommend people check it out. And what Chaosium, they're the creators of the game system. What they do is they take out whatever the players are in this game, it's called investigators, whatever they're doing. So it's like, this is what's happening. So, Bob is going into the storage facility, and he's gonna be killed by Jim. Jim is gonna then go from the storage facility, and with like this bloody cleaver that's dripping blood out the door, he's gonna get into his car. He's gonna drive halfway across town to like his hideout, and whatever's gonna happen. So then when the players get there, if the players get there before Jim gets there, they might be able to save Bob, but this is what's happening if like they don't do it. And I mean, like, this is kind of just like rambled examples. There's no Jim and Bob example in there, but like, I think that's a great thing whenever you're writing content, not just for like putting it online or trying to sell, but for your players, going and saying this is what's happening, whether the players investigate or do anything or not. The big bad evil guy, let's say it's a lich. The lich is going to complete the ritual to destroy like the world tree or whatever it might be. That's an example from the first ever campaign I ran. And so whatever the players do, by a certain date, the lich is going to do this. And then whatever your players do leading up to that is how they prepare for the lich destroying the world tree. And so then that way it's not, okay, well, I planned on the lich showing up here and the lich got banished, and because of like X, Y, and Z factors, the banishment, when it completed for 1 minute, permanently banished him to this other realm. He has no way of getting back, and now the campaign's over because I don't know where to go from here.
Well, I definitely do. I'm not one for really writing out adventure modules. I think that's more like your strength, because I focus mainly on creature stat blocks. Like if I do homebrew stuff in my main game, like my actual campaign, I don't hard structure things out because I run more of a free roam open world esque game. There's really no rails on anything other than like I'll have a main quest that is sort of the hook, but everybody's player character backstory storylines are like the main focal point. But also, as you've said, the world around them, it's important for that to be constantly moving and acting on its own volition, not based off of what they do. They're living in the world that feels alive. So
that's a lot more eloquent than the word salad I threw out.
Well, in my campaign, so I started a campaign off in a city. I was like, everybody make characters that are going to be either from the city or arriving to the city for some reason. And they wrote into their backstories like why they were here. And what I was doing was I introduced turmoil like very early on in the campaign, like the second session or something. I made it very clear that something was going on in the greater world around them. So they heard a levy of soldiers marching through the city streets, kind of humming these like crusader-like hymns as they're walking through the streets, and they were a bunch of elves going to war, it looked like, and it was like a concerning sight. Now, this has nothing to do with them. They're not involved in this war. They're level 1 characters. They just started the campaign. Why should they care? Well, you get them to care by they want to leave the city because the city's going to become under siege. So you can't just leave the city because you have to get a border pass or something, some sort of pass that allows them to just leave and cross the border into another territory. So that's sort of my idea of, or my example, I should say, of pre-planning out stuff and also making the world around them active despite what they're doing, so they still care about the world.
Exactly. And I think that's the balance you want to achieve, is like you have to make your players care about what you're doing in the world, because if not, like, it gets boring real quick. I've been that DM who's been like, all right, here's the entire world lore, this is like everything down to like every shopkeep, their name, whatever like drama's going on in their life. And then the player's like, oh, we want to go over there, and like, we don't really care. We wanted a Fletcher in this town, and you put a blacksmith and like a carpenter and like an herbalist, but like I can't get arrows for my guy. And so, and they're like, like you said, like players as bad as this is going to sound, they really don't care a lot about your world lore as long as it doesn't affect with them. So it's tying in that world lore and making it matter to them, really reeling them in, using what's going on around them. I mean, there's no better way to make your players hate the big bad evil guy that you want to be the end game boss than to really just like offset them and peeve them off in the first few sessions, making it personal. You know, for instance, in my home campaign right now, the bad guy, it's a guy from one of my players, actually two of my players' backstories. It's this guy named Captain Hamish, and to really like irk them, man, he's going after and silencing their favorite lord, making it so he can't talk. He's personally taken like the favorite like great sword of our fighter, and they've laid siege to a village that was very important to the players, and using like gnolls, which the players in like the backstory, they were part of like these things called the raid wars, and they don't like gnolls, and he uses gnolls against them to make things personal, also sending like old war buddies after the character with the soldier background. And it's making it personal because sure, I could be like, Hamish is this big bad guy and he's bad because he's tied into your backgrounds, but it's like, no, he's bad. He took your great sword personally, or I guess he didn't take it. It was one of his lackeys took it, but it's like he took your great sword. He's attacked your families. He's besieged your village that you're from, and it's like now the players are like, we have a little bit of skin in the game. Like this guy has personally gypped us, and now we need to go after him.
So for my campaign, it's a little different because I really didn't have a BBEG planned out. I was mostly focused hard on my player character's backstory quests. And throughout that, I kind of learned like my players actually do care about like what's going on around them because the story is so hard focused on them. Like you try to like tie in their backstories, and if you're a really good storyteller, you can weave all those backstories together almost like a single rope and then lead it to like, oh, this was all the BBG all along, you just didn't know. I'm not quite there yet, but trying to work my way around to getting to that point somehow, some way. But bringing it back around to homebrew versus official content, in my opinion, there's another thing with campaigns. Most campaigns die out at, I would say, probably level 8 to 10.
Yeah, very seldom do you ever go past 13. Like, you really don't. This is the first time I've ever ran a game where my player characters have hit level, like, over 10. 8 was the highest for the longest time for me because I was always terrified of it because I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to have to deal with Wish, Power Word Kill, all those high-level spells.
Yeah, that's the scariest thing. I'm really not worried about like the fighter, even though the fighters tend to actually... Those are the ones that actually shock you more than like the wizard, because the wizard can, do one big thing, and it's like, oh, that was a big spell, that was scary. Whoo, he doesn't have that spell slot anymore. But then the fighter's just... multi-attack with 4 attacks.
And then like you also get like the paladin with smite, like a crit smite, and if like the paladin is going up against like an undead or something vulnerable to radiant damage, like good night. There's 400 damage on the table right there. Good luck surviving.
Yeah, that's the weird thing about high level monsters is I don't feel like on the higher end they have enough HP. They don't do enough damage. Like the Tarask used to be, from when I first started DMing, that was like that's the creature that shall not be named. You can't ever throw a Tarask in your game. It's too overpowered. And then I'm like looking at it now after getting, this deep into DMing, and I've had, this many years of experience DMing. It's like, dude, my fighter, if he hits level 20 with multi-attack, he could... like a Tarask HP is like 500 at the most, maybe. Right. Fighters can do like 150 to 200 damage in a turn, and the Tarask doesn't have ranged attacks. So when the ranger gets on the broom of flying and goes 800 feet in the air and just shoots arrows down at the Tarrasque, it can't do anything.
No. Well, and that's, yeah, I've seen like the copy pasta of the Tarrasque, or like the way to get around the Tarrasque is like putting the fighter on, or like giving the fighter, or goodness gracious, I cannot talk today. Putting the fighter on either like a broom or giving him like some sort of flying ability, either through like the spell fly or not, putting them up in the air and just firing a barrage of arrows. Like eventually it's gonna whittle down because you're gonna crit, you're gonna land those attacks. Now just take the entire town guard, somehow get them to levitate up into the air.
Yeah.
And then it's like you're shooting what, like 300 arrows in like a 1 minute period, and it's like that Tarrasque is gonna go down pretty quick.
Well, the Tarrasque also, like, it's not a creature that's gonna really have minions with it either. So like usually with like a Lich or something, it's gonna have a lair in which it's probably placed hundreds of glyphs of warding traps along with hundreds and hundreds of undead minions. So it's just, the Lich has like only 100 something HP, but you're supposed to play a Lich really smart. So you play it in the way that's going to make your players most mad, because it's going to be frustrating for them, which that's how you're supposed to play it. I haven't played a creature like that yet because I'm always worried my players are going to get mad at me, but really, if you're going to play a Lich, it's like you give him 3 magic items, fill up all 3 of his attunement slots. He never comes within range of the fighter. He's always up, like, in the air somewhere, casting spells down, keeping everybody away from him, all while the minions are harrying you, keeping you in one spot for him to just Finger of Death, Power Word Kill, Fireball, what have you. But if you really just take stuff straight out of the monster manual and you go, well, I'm going to throw this at my high level characters, I think that's the main reason why games don't go beyond like level 10. 8 to 10 is like when people go, okay, it's time to end the campaign, because if we go beyond 15, it's just the players become the controllers of the game, and the DM is like playing a survival horror game, trying to keep them challenged, and it feels like it's impossible.
Exactly, it's like the good old like objective survive option.
Yeah,
yeah. So I think you brought up some good points there with the one of them being. I don't know where I saw this. I don't know if this is official or anything like that, but most D&D official campaigns end by level 13. So like the game is also only really balanced for level 3 to 10, 12, 13, and very few modules, if like any, at least official ones from like Wizards of the Coast, go past that level 13 mark. I mean, a few of them go like level 20, but those are super few and far between. And so I think that's the tough part, is if you want to play high level games, it's really hard to use like CR20 creatures, because I don't know if WotC just didn't look into this, or why this is the reason that there's so much power creep in Dungeons and Dragons right now, but the game is just not optimized for past level 13 play. In fact, when I was one of the few times I've been a high-level player in my gaming experience, I think we hit level 14. That's when the campaign ended. And at level 14, we were taking on CR 16, 17, and 18s because we had magic items, we had spells, and there was 3 of us, by the way. This isn't like 5 level 14, but like it's just 3 level 14 players, but with like artifacts that you can start looking at getting that you're working towards through the campaign, and just legendary and even like rare and above, like very rare magic items. It really scales your character. Right now, one of the things that I've had to do is I've taken the Grim Hollow book, and I've gone through, and 2 of my players now in my D&D weekly game, I've given them transformations. One of them has lycanthropy and one of them has the specter, and that essentially levels them up 1 to 2 levels with how much that adds just on that one transformation. Now you throw in a couple like magic items, some healing potions or other potions, action economy is a big thing, and that CR 16, 17, 18 creature is being taken out by level 12, level 13 players. And that's the tough part, and I think that's where you and I, where we were looking at working on the Megalomortis, a collaboration video that we did. The Megalomortis is supposed to be an endgame boss for like level like 18, 19, 20 players. And we had a look at it of like, okay, so how are we gonna do this? How are we gonna make this so it doesn't die in the first few turns? It has vulnerability to radiant damage, so like a paladin comes up in there and smites and crits, it's still gonna be a bad day for the Megalomortis. But we've built enough stuff into the stat block and into its lore that it should be able to go toe-to-toe with your high-level players. And that's the tough part. Anthony, do you want to kind of go into like some of the things we did for the Megalomortis, as you were the one who built out the stat block, on what made it so powerful for high level gaming?
Yes. Let me pull the stat block up here so I don't.
I know I should have been like, hey, this whole here. Time you should have it.
So let me make sure this is the right stat block. Here we go. Okay, so the biggest thing when you're making very, very high level content is it's almost like fickle in a way. Mm-hmm. You don't want to make it adversarial. That's like adversarial DMing is whenever it's you versus the players and you're making stuff specifically to like make them mad and not have fun. Well, high level player characters, I think the problem with stuff in like the official content, like looking at the Tarrasque, for example, I opened up my monster manual and I flipped to the Tarrasque page. 286 for those that want to look at it also. It is a gargantuan monstrosity. This is CR 30. This is the highest challenge rating that you can get, 155,000 XP. Its bite attack only does 4d12 piercing damage. Now, 4d12 piercing damage, plus 10 from its strength mod at 30. That's a lot of damage. It's 36 on a hit, but this is a CR 30 monster. Okay? I am of the opinion that instead of that doing 4d12, that should be doing like 12d12 at CR 30, the highest challenge rating that there is.
It needs to be a little scary because, at CR 30, with how D&D is balanced by the rules, rules is written, that means you'd need 4 level 30 players, and because it caps out at 20, that means you're going to need several additional level 20 players to take this thing on in the balanced encounter, quote unquote.
It's considered a Titan creature, so that is literally it's a world-ending creature, and you can even see in the artwork there's birds for scale. This creature is Godzilla sized.
Right.
So how does the barbarian get bit by this and just walk it off because it's only 4d12?
Well, and then, at level 20, the barbarian, is it magical damage? I haven't looked at the Tarrasque stat block in a while.
Nope.
So let's say the barbarian by level 20 has a way to gain immunity against non-magical bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage. That just makes it so then the Tarrasque is essentially, it's just a punching bag at that point for the barbarian. The barbarian can go toe-to-toe, not take any damage. And that's one thing that I've been looking at, and I don't have the answer yet. I've been looking at a way to make it so, depending on the types of immunity, especially mundane weapons like bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing, when those affect a creature. Because that's one of the tough things is it's okay, barbarian has immunity to slashing, piercing, bludgeoning. Let's say, for instance, a werewolf. Werewolf has immunity to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing from non-magical attacks. Could a CR3 werewolf then be immune to the damages of the Tarrasque and just win after a battle of attrition?
Technically speaking, yeah.
Rules is written.
Kind of would.
The werewolf. I guess the world will be run by werewolves after all the people without resistance.
The Tarrasque can swallow stuff, so if it bit the werewolf, it could swallow it, and then you're taking 16d6 acid damage at the start of your turn, which that's a lot of damage. It's 56 damage on average, but still,
if we could get a werewolf immune to acid damage.
Yeah, so to put it in perspective for the power level that player characters have at that level of play, you have 3 attunement slots. You have 4, and if you're a crazy DM, you have up to 8 players at your table. They all have, at this point, they should have legendary magic items, a stockpile of healing potions at this point. They should
like
have
the 300 healing potions. So they're like, we're gonna save this in case we need it, and then it's just like
a bag of holding with literally anything in it that they need at any point in time. You have to play hardball, and like I even see it in the comment section when I make very high level monsters like the Megalomortis or something. People get mad. They're like, dude, this is OP, like fighters can't do anything against it. Or so, for example, looking at the Megalomortis, I made sure to give it a high AC. Its HP is 405, which is a lot, but you know, it's not the highest. The Trask has 600, but it can heal itself. Like that's a big thing. So like it can heal itself. It has 4 legendary resistances. The Trask at CR 30 only has 3. The Trask at CR 30 should have like 5.
Right. Every 5 CR levels above 20 is just like an additional like resistance.
Yeah. What else? So we'll just even like go down the stat block a little bit. So it could grab player characters, so that's locking people down. It has ranged attacks that cut the healing off of everybody. So when you get hit with the Necro Bolt attack, you can't regain hit points until the start of the Megalomortis' next turn. That immediately lights a fire under them to DPS race this creature down, and it's going to make them feel pressured. That's like the biggest thing for like a 20th level character. I'm going to polymorph it into a rabbit so I can't do anything. Like,
and now we can just put it into a bag of devouring and problem solve.
And destroy it instantly or something like that. You kind of have to try to think of all the deadly combos now. There's still the chance that player characters at that level with creative thinking destroy the Megalomortis in like 1 to 2 turns, which is, if they think tactically enough to do that.
Well, that's something that we put into like the lore, is like in the lore stat block it comes with, it talks about ways to counter and prepare for the Megalomortis. One thing that you brought up, I think you were talking to like one of the people in your community about specifically like how do fighters fight this thing. It's like, part of like the quest line against this thing might be finding like the Sunblade, where it can do radiant damage and he can just start like going to town on this this poor undead giant who's like, I'm now an all-powerful being, and then here comes a fighter with like boss music with him as he pulls out the Sunblade.
Sunblade doing, its damage is replaced with radiant damage, but also if you're attacking an undead, it's an additional die worth of damage. The fighters get 4 attacks a turn. They also get 2 multi-attack, or 2 action surges. So that's 8 attacks in 1 turn of 2d8 radiant damage, which out of 8 attacks, what are the odds that they crit on any one of those?
Right. Well, I mean,
immediately that's gonna be,
you get like a champion fighter, and it's like that doubles it right there.
It's like a 10-15% chance to crit every single hit, and that's he's gonna go nuclear. But as long as the Megalomortis survives that nuclear turn he has, it does have legendary actions, which it can use Hemo Drain. It can use, Wretched Swipe to lacerate characters. It can summon things to help its action economy, because in 5e, that's the biggest way to challenge player characters, is like you put the action economy against them.
Oh yeah. Well, you have to do it because by those high levels, like you have so many options for as like the players. You have usually by then you have like minions or summons, or like if you're a fighter you might even have your own like small army you're bringing with you at level 20, especially in older editions. When I started playing in 3.5, and by then like part of the rules were like, like you should have like a bastion or like a castle in like the hills, and you should have men flocking to you underneath your banner, and like I played a 3.5 game where it ended for me because of just work schedule conflict. After 2.5 years of us playing, and I was level, I think, like 15 or 16, and by then, like, I had an actual, like, sizable army that I could take into battle. Now I used them for, like, defending and to, like, do things that, like, the party didn't want to do, but that needed to get done. But yeah, in D&D and 5e, I mean, a lot of times I also see, like, fighters have, like, small cohorts. If you have a necromancer in your party, like a wizard necromancer, like, you're bringing a horde of undead with you. The wizards bring in, like, dragons. The druid has all the forest friends he can want. He's bringing, like, Trent. He's bringing, like, Trent's going in, like, March of Isengard. And the Megalomortis, I mean, if it's in his lair, he's gonna have his zombie hordes. He's gonna have his necro-themed tiers. But, I mean, the Megalomortis is one guy, and per the lore, once he goes down, everything else goes down with him. So it's like, you gotta be very smart about your action economy, because it doesn't matter how hard they hit. If he goes down in the first round because the players have 40 attacks they're throwing at him, then that's not fun for anybody. That wasn't fun for you. That probably wasn't fun for your players, unless it was something that they prepared and, like, really thought outside the box for.
Yeah, it shouldn't have to always be like you have to have minions. Like, you should be able to make creatures that can on their own pose a very dangerous threat. That's why I think like in my opinion, the Trask is not strong enough to fight 4 level 20 characters with Vorpal swords, flying capabilities. That's why I like homebrewing monsters.
Ranger with the boots of flying, just doop, doop, doop,
yeah,
doop,
and
doop.
that kind of brings us back to like why you have like it's almost like it's not even an option. Like, if you're a new dungeon master and it's like homebrewing stuff intimidates you, when you get to higher levels, that game is going to become so stressful for you to run. That's probably why most dungeon masters quit after 8 to 10, and they try to end it and wrap it up by 13.
Well, and I think you bring up a good point. It's like DM burnout. So let's talk about that real quick. Like, I've had it. I bet you've had it. Everybody who's a DM in our audience has probably had it or is going through it right now. And if you haven't, either you're brand new or, man, you have a lot more resilience than we do. But, yeah, like...
It's tiring.
It does. And here's the thing is... I guess the way I want to formulate like this question to kind of keep it on like that, what do you do for like your or like Dungeon Master burnout? Like, do you go and get like different materials? Do you like revitalize it? Do you just end the campaign? Like, what are some things that you've done to help with your DM burnout?
Well, funnily enough, what I end up doing when I start experiencing burnout is I will like, I'll go to like pre-made modules and I'll start like whenever I ran the Forge of Fury, I just threw the Forge of Fury into my world and I made it part of one of my player characters' backstory quests. And I was like, you have to go to Krundakar to find this object, or to find a person that you're looking for. And then I even tweaked the storyline in that dungeon completely, so it wasn't even the same at all. So that's a good way to help with DM burnout. You could go online and find other, just like modules to throw into your world. So like, let's say you're 8 months deep into a campaign and the player characters just finished a big arc and you're like, how am I going to top that? Or where are we going now? Or they start running the game off the rails and you're like, I planned for them to go to this city because there's this evil baron that's been replaced by a doppelganger and he's been like killing everyone, but now they want to go to Beakweir, the home of the halflings, and dance and party for 4 days straight, and this whole city is going to be destroyed by the time they go there now. So what do we... And then they completely ignore that too. So I think the best way I deal with burnout is like just start taking other resources and throwing them into your campaign.
Yeah, I think...
or take a break too.
Yeah, I think... So, in my experience with like DM burnout, I think part of it is It can be difficult. I think it can come from a plethora of things. It can be either like you were wanting to do a campaign and it just didn't go the way you were wanting it to, and then all these ideas that you put all this time and resources and energy into are just gone now. It can come from just like you've been the forever DM and it's like, okay, this is like year 5 of me running games every single week and I'm ready for like a break. But yeah, some of the things that I do for like DM and GM burnout, I think changing up the system is great. You know, if you're in like a D&D setting and you want to keep the game going but kind of want to freshen up, you can always switch over to like Pathfinder, Easy D6, other tabletop systems that are like that. I think another thing is just I think for like the DM who's burnt out because they're putting too many hours, you know. I think it's Monty and Kelly from Dungeon Dudes who said this, but like you shouldn't be putting more than 2 hours for every game hour into your session prep each week. So like if you plan on playing for like 3 to 4 hours, you shouldn't really be going more than 8 hours of prep, because and I think part of that is you do some of the work on the front end when you're preparing the game, but like in between sessions you shouldn't be doing more than that, because there is a time where like you become burnt out, and if you're the unfortunate forever DM, like that's tough for you, that's tough for the players. And one thing that I've found is also just being honest with your players. Like most of the time, like your players are going to be pretty cool about it. If you go up and you're saying, hey, I'm starting to feel a little bit burnt out in this game, and bring in things like it could be from like maybe the role play has been kind of fading and like the energy's kind of gone. Maybe things aren't going in a great direction and sessions just feel like they're lagging. You know, coming to them and letting them kind of air like, you know, hey, this is what we're thinking. This is, you know, X, Y, and Z. I think that can help a lot. And then as you said, you know, one thing to help with pulling that back is just there's a lot of great third-party content and even like official content that you can get that you can implement into your games. I mean, that's one of the beauties of it is there's so much free content out there for our awesome hobby that we have, where people have been like, this is what I've done, and either they're showing it off or they're like, hey, you know, I made this specifically for like my Patreon and it's under like the free tiers, or it's like on Reddit. I think Reddit's a great resource as well, different Discord communities and stuff like that, and just taking those little pieces to shorten that workload I think does wonders for people.
Yes. Also, I do like the point of like trying out different systems, because I started dabbling in Shadow Dark, and that's like really fun, and that's actually stripped down 5e, but like hardcore and brutal, where the players at really no point in time are like in the driver's seat. You are in the driver's seat 100% of the time. They do not have the same power level, because in 5e they're superheroes. And like I do have like some examples of like what has caused me to burn out too. I had a TPK, my first TPK that happened. I was so invested in those characters that like I felt sad when they died. Mm-hmm. So whenever they made these new sets of characters, I was invested at first, and then like I slowly was like, I really don't know how to take the story and do what I was doing with that first campaign. So like I was getting burnt out, because every week I just wanted to like not even think about D&D, and like everybody's like, the players don't have to do anything but show up with their character sheet. You have to sit here on your computer on your free time and go, okay, what are we doing for this week's quest? What's going to be the hook? What magic items am I going to put in the dungeon? That's where I also like to use a lot of random charts, because as the dungeon master, I'm never surprised. Like, I don't get to be surprised by anything because I already know it's going to happen. I should know it's going to happen. You know, sometimes in modules you don't know it's going to happen because for some reason, hey, sorry we didn't tell you 4 pages ago, but also this character is actually not alive anymore. He's not actually in the dungeon.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you get hit with those surprises, and you're like, "Oh, this is a bad surprise that might add to the burnout."
And then you go, "Well, the NPC they met told them he knew where they were, so I guess I'm going to just have to make it that he lied." But anyways, yeah, so that's like an example for me. It was like losing interest in the characters that my players were playing at the time. I was like, I can't think of like a gripping story for a rat man, an ogre, and a random paladin they met in the sewers. Like I got nothing.
Yeah, no, that is one of the things is like, so something that I've done, and this is a recent change to like how I run my games. I've found a lot of success in helping with like not feeling overwhelmed or feeling any burnout, because I feel like in any campaign you might not be completely burnt out, but sometimes like we've all had that where it's like, man, I got D&D on Saturday. I haven't prepared anything for it. I don't really want to like. You know, is this like the week where it's like, guys, I'm sick? Like,
yeah.
You know, we've all had those weeks where like it can be tough. And something that I've found that's really helped is having a good, strong session 0 where I put out on the table what I'm expecting or like what I'm wanting. Because that's something I haven't done until recently, where I'm like, yeah, what do you guys want to do? And it's like I don't put into account anything that I might want to do. For instance, I'm doing a D&D, or sorry, I'm doing a Call of Cthulhu game. So right now my schedule is I have D&D every other week, and then on the off weeks I have a Call of Cthulhu game, and I'm the DM and the keeper for both games. And in my Call of Cthulhu game, the last couple times we've done Call of Cthulhu, we've had one that was just a complete like we were ghost hunters in. Doing in like 2009, we were doing our own version of like Taps, like the Ghost Adventure show. And so like our show, I think it was called like Ghost or Cap or something dumb like that. And like my character, I was a player in this one, but I was the host. I was like this guy who had like the frosted tips and like the average TV host. We had our camera guy / security, and he was kind of like our fighter, for lack of a better term, because in Call of Cthulhu you don't have classes. You have skills, and you like are always working on your skills and stuff like that. And then we had like the co-host, and we had our unpaid intern, and those were the 4 players. and so like that was a great campaign. Lots of laughs, lots of fun. And then for a while there, we were just doing one-shots where like I'd go and I got like Fear of Sharp Little Needles, which is a great third-party company's resource. It's like 20 adventures or scenarios as they're called in Call of Cthulhu, and the scenarios go, and it's like, hey, like they're each 5 pages long, every single one of them, and it has everything you need to run the game in those 5 pages. And so we were doing a lot of those and having lots of fun with it. But once again, like you have some seriousness, some not. And, you know, this time around, I was like, dude, I really want like a good, gritty, serious game where it's like, this is what's going on. Everybody's invested. Everybody takes it serious. And it's going to be a very dark, very gritty, very like gruesome game. And so to keep it in theme, what I did was in session 0, I'm like, okay, guys, this is what I am expecting. This is what I want to run. This is the game. It's going to be a very dark, a very serious. There'll be times for jokes. There'll be funny moments. But like overall, we're going to be very serious. All the scenarios tie in together. And it's going to be one of those things where like a note from session 1 that you take might come up again in session 20 and be important then. And I want it to be where the players are taking it serious. Your average everyday people. And then also, I want the players to follow into like a certain criteria. And so I was like, okay, I want your characters to be tied to academia, investigation, like a police investigator, a private investigator, maybe like a journalist. Or you can be part of like, or you could be somebody who's tied to like the mythos, where it's like, okay, I have one player who is an author and an occultist who received like this strange book from his dying uncle, and he can't read it because the letters shift every time he tries looking at the pages. We have an old professor who is 60-something years old, and in Call of Cthulhu, age actually matters. It affects your stats, and he's like this old, withered man. He's this old professor over at Miskatonic University. We have one person who's a forensic investigator, So like the guy who looks at like dead bodies and tries to figure out how they died. And then we have a general physician, because that was another thing I added, is I wanted all the players to be a little bit more on like the wealthy side, where they had the money to be able to do this, and it wasn't like one of those things where it's like, hey, like. And then another thing that I've done, and I found that this really helps get the players going, because we've all been there. We've had a campaign where we have a reason for why the party's together in session 1. It makes sense. It's like, hey, you guys are in the tavern. The tavern is attacked by zombies and skeletons. Makes sense why the party's together. But why is the paladin and the like rogue urchin thief, who is like against all religion, and this fighter who is tied to like some army or whatever, and then you have like a sorcerer who's like really trying to figure out like the secrets to overcoming like death. Why are they staying together after session 1 or session 2, whenever that tavern scene wraps up? And this is a complete steal from Seth Skorkowski. I don't want to say that this is my own, but it's taken from a game called Traveler. It's a great system. I actually own all the books. I was gonna be doing this instead of the Call of Cthulhu game, but we really liked the idea of like this gritty, so this one's on the back burner. But part of character creation in Traveler is you have to have a tie to your player. Like your players have to have a tie to each other. So player A is tied to player B, C, and D. And part of that is you go in and you say that you have a shared backstory. So for instance, if you have the fighter who's this soldier and you have the cleric who's supposed to be this healer, they were in a battle together. The cleric was like doing field medicine, and because of that, with their shared backstory, they have this story where they work together, and it's an actual like story that they can call back on and be like, hey, this is why we know each other, why we're staying with each other past session 1. And because of that, now they each get a bonus. So it's like, I'll give them a proficiency or maybe something that makes sense to their characters for having this. Maybe it's, hey, like you start off with extra gold because you guys pulled off this heist. It's like the rogue and the sorcerer, you know, they were both very interested in money, and they like robbed this like really rich merchant, and now they start off with a little extra money because their shared backstory makes them a little bit richer. And that's the key, is you give a benefit for like their story and you tie it in. So then the players are like, past session 1, they're like, yeah, we've been friends for years, or like, I trust this guy, he saved my life in the war. And I think that really helps build that that player camaraderie that we want, and that can help with the burnout. To tie it back into the original question, is like, once I realize I feed off of like my players, and so like when my players are like and they're tired and they're not really wanting to be there, I get the same way, and then the session just kind of like nosedives real quick.
Yeah, one of my players in my first campaign that I was running, he actually was like getting bored with D&D itself halfway through the campaign, and I could tell, like he even said, like, he was like, I'm just not having fun with D&D anymore, the combat's too slow, I'm just bored. And I was like, okay, well, you don't have to play anymore, you know. But I would rather have people that are having fun at the table. If it was like my fault that they weren't having fun, obviously like I have to fix that. But like if they're not enjoying the game, I don't even want them playing at my game table. Which, I have a question for you.
Yeah,
do you have any horror stories from like problem players at your games?
So I've actually I've been very lucky for most of my D&D. So you know, going back, I really say that I started playing D&D back in like 2016, 2017. I played a few sessions, like a couple one-shots that my friend's dad, who lived across the street, would do for us like once every year or so, like that. Like, and we do like these one-shots, and it was all in like, it was either 2nd edition or 3.5, depending on like the year. I really didn't know what I was doing. I was just there for the laughs and to make things. I was that character. I was that player actually in those campaigns. It's like 10-year-old August who's like, oh, I can go murder the shopkeep. Mwahaha, I'm gonna go murder the shopkeep. I have unlimited freedom. But like the first time I really sat down and played D&D, It was like in like the end of 2016, beginning of 2017. It was like right around Christmas time, if I remember correctly. And it was with my cousin and several of our really good friends and like my brother and stuff like that. And so we had a great time. It was like us close friends. And then, I wasn't playing a whole lot. It was just like random one-shots and things here and there. And then in 2019, I was like, I really enjoy D&D. I'm going to make a campaign and I'm going to run it and it's going to be great. It's going to be this most epic campaign ever. And I made out like this huge map and I wrote like all the world histories and I like drew the maps. And like I put like hundreds of hours into this campaign that petered out by like level 5.
My first campaign, yeah.
And so
a common advice for most people is like don't prep more than you need.
No, start off if you are a first-time DM or prospective first-time DM, or like you're a player who's like, I want to try. Literally build a town or a village somewhere in between, like a smaller settlement, and put 5 points on a piece of paper that says outside the town there's a cemetery that has a necromancer in it to the north. To the south is a warmongering orc tribe. To the east there is an ocean that's infested with pirates, and to the west you have like this. That's all you need. And so if the players want the bigger, broader outside world, then you can start expanding. But then you're not, because we all have those ideas. Our first campaign, we're like, we want this and this, and I saw this and that's awesome. I want to put this and this and this and this in there. And before you know it, you have like a OneNote or whatever you use to organize your DM notes that is overflowing. You don't know where anything's at. There's so much information in there, and you might not even get to that point where you even get to use it. Just build out like that small settlement, put a few things that are going in the settlement, have a few key NPCs, and start from there if you're wanting to do like a homebrew first world, because then you can find out where your strengths are, because that's another thing is we all have strengths and we all have weaknesses as DMs. And so build out from there, and like that's part of your like 6 to 8 hours of DM prep that you spend in the week is, okay, this week they're going over to this area, now I'm gonna start fleshing this out. Or like, hey, like they really want to dig into like this noble's past, this like one-off guy that I have 2 sentences written about, flesh him out then. And now it's like, okay, this noble isn't just like he's got a funny accent and a pencil mustache and silvery hair, and he is very aggressive and likes to use intimidation. Now it's, you have the whole thing. You have that's when you put in who his family is, his ties to like the king or whoever the ruler is, what his position is inside like the town or the settlement. And then that's when you build it out. Do you have any other advice like for first time DMs though?
You don't even have to go that far, like for like making a whole town. Well, I guess if you want like a hub area, you should make like a village or something that's just,
villages
say,
are so
okay,
easy.
There's a blacksmith, there's a trader, there's an inn. That's like the 3 things. And then, you could have most of players' equipment in those 3 buildings. But also, what I did for like overworld travel, I didn't have a map for like years of running my games. Like I didn't start making a map until a couple years ago. I started my actual world map, and I'm still constantly adding stuff to it. But I think once you get more experienced, having a world map helps you a lot, because you can visualize, and then also your players get to visualize stuff. And then you can say, okay, when you're making a new character, pick a place on the world map, and we're going to say you're from there, and then we'll even make a village together, so then they're engaged. But coming back to what we were saying, and some like advice would be like, you want to do travel outside of a village or something. You don't have a map, just write the cardinal directions, northeast, southwest. Write an encounter at each of those cardinal directions and say, okay, which direction are you guys traveling in? And they say, oh, I want to go east. You say, okay, just make me a survival check. And then, they start traveling east. You already have that encounter planned out. It's a goblin being chased by a chimera. That's the encounter. You don't. They could
and it's
ignore
an easy
it. They could
encounter, and they could, yeah, like you said, bypass it.
That's actually how. That's how one of my most beloved NPCs joined the party. It was a goblin being chased by a chimera. It was a goblin boss stat block, and he comes running out of the bushes. And the player character's like, what's going on? And he's like, there's a thing flying above my head, I gotta get out of here. And suddenly a chimera comes in, and they're fighting a chimera with this goblin who's helping them, and then he becomes Sawlock, the goblin companion, and he stays with the party up until the party gets TPK'd. And then that he becomes like this crazy NPC. But that's kind of the fun in D&D for the dungeon master, is like you never know who they're gonna adopt into the party.
No.
That's like why I like random charts a lot. There's some people who hate random charts. Like they hate it. They need to be in control of everything. For me personally, I like random charts. I like I don't know what they're going to encounter today. Let's roll this D100, and then you go.
See. Yeah, one point of advice though on the random charts is make sure you read through most of them at least to kind of get an idea, because if you do a random chart, you might be like my players 5 sessions ago, where in this little bit more grimdark setting, they ran into Sasquatch in the woods because that's what they rolled. But yeah, make sure it feels like, and you can build and curate your own random charts.
ChatGPT can make you a D100 chart in 2 seconds.
Absolutely.
Like, ChatGPT is a great tool for dungeon mastering, especially if you're a new dungeon master. And I use it as an experienced dungeon master. It helps with a lot of things. I know people don't like AI and it's scary.
It's a very controversial useful topic, and I think for a future roll for Banter episode, that is something that we need to like deep dive into, like the pros cons of like using AI and how to use ChatGPT.
Why I like AI in games.
I know, maybe we have to find a third person in here to be like the adversary against it. But
I know my one friend hates it.
But yeah, the thing is yeah, I think random encounter tables are great. Also, like, just curating your own, because going back to what we were talking about just a moment ago, one of our favorite, as a player, one of the few times where I've been able to be like a long-term player, we had wasn't necessarily a random encounter. It was more of this encounter with this guy who was supposed to be like this Duke's right-hand man, and it wasn't necessarily planned out or anything like that. And we were supposed to, it's supposed to be one of those things where we see this guy, we go and we fight him, we kill him, and like we never even remember his name like the next session, and he's long forgotten by the end of the campaign. But thing is when we were fighting him, my character got intrigued by like the fact that he was using clockwork, like these clockwork dogs, like these hounds. And he was like this human who had some scales and like a little bit of like dragonborn ancestry from what I could tell. And I was like, I defeated him and I disarmed him, and like I had him to the point like I had like my axe pointed at him and was like, you need to surrender and stuff like this. And the way that like my dungeon master role played him was like, he stands up and is like, listen, I'm gonna give you the keys and I'm gonna walk out of here with my one remaining clockwork hound, and I never want to see you again. And like he gives us like the keys and like bypasses the fact like I have my blade pointed at him, was like, you need to surrender, but he gives us like the keys that we need, and he walks off. And then I want to say it was like several levels later in another arc of this campaign, he ends up being a mercenary, because like he's this disgraced like general underneath this like duke who like had given us the keys and had gotten out that like he had helped us and stuff like that, save his own skin. So now he's just working as like a mercenary for hire, and he's on the other side from us again. And so we have like our battle with him, and it's like one of those like duels where it's like neither one of us is really going for the kill, and we're going up against each other, and I'm trying to convince him to join our side. I'm like, you'd be a great asset, like one of the things that like he was motivated by was like money and stuff. I'm like, we'll pay you well, like we need your help, all this stuff. But what we didn't know is he was working with the big bad of the campaign, and so like he was denying it. And we have our duel, and once again we win, and he goes off to do greater and grander things. And then we hear things about him like in taverns and like little bits and pieces here. And then finally at the very end of the campaign, he's with the big bad as one of like his henchmen, and like it was like this whole thing trying to convince him like, we've never gone through to you, but like you're really essentially you're really backing the wrong horse and we don't want to kill you. And we finally, like, his character and mine, we finally had our official fight to the death, because it had always been like mine as like the frontlining tank versus him, and like these different like duels we had done. And it's like incorporating those, my dungeon master had no idea in the very beginning. The first time we ran into him, his name was Gaunt. The first time we met Gaunt, that he was going to become part of the big bad's evil plans and was going to be one of his like right hand men in the final battles. But like reoccurring NPCs and villains and stuff like that, it's really hard to do it or like planned. It's always one of those things that come organically. See how your players react with like this person. Don't be afraid of like reintroducing people and stuff like that. Seeing where that takes you, and then those people that you have as like one-offs, if you see your players are starting like have even an inkling of like intrigue into their backstories, like play it out, bring them back in. Like the next time we fought him, he was just a mercenary on the other side, and so it wasn't even like he was like, oh yeah, this is like, it's like, oh hey, this is a guy that you recognize. And so
yeah, that's cool too, and I like the comment on organic things happening. Like, I think honestly the best storylines that I've ever had in my campaign are things that come out completely out of nowhere. Like I didn't plan for it to happen.
Oh, no. You never
the
do.
Player character, like the dice. I always say the dice tell the story. Sometimes, like sometimes the player characters roll bad, and that one orc on the orc tribe's team just becomes an absolute menace, and maybe he downs the whole party because nobody can hit him, and I'm rolling nat 20s every time I roll for his attack rolls, and then you make him like the tribe leader out of nowhere, and you didn't plan for it. But like I feel like that ends up sparking your creativity more than when you're just like, okay, I guess I have to come up with we're just gonna make an evil merchant lord who's like overly taxing all the villages that he's selling his wares to, and he's got like ties with the Thieves Guild. Sometimes that stuff like that works where you're just making like multiple different ways that a character is connected with things. But sometimes like you did something on a whim, and you were like didn't really have an explanation for it, and then something else happens later on that you don't have an explanation for, and it's tied to an NPC, and you can go, what if I said that thing that happened randomly in the beginning of the campaign that I messed up on is actually because of this orc NPC that just decided to roll a bunch of nat 20s in that combat session we had 20 sessions ago, which in real time that's like months ago, so nobody's going to really remember it until they go, no, it's him, it's that guy,
this was all related from the beginning. You're a genius.
Yeah, and then you're a genius. Or your player characters go, wait a minute, I think this guy's this, and then you go, that's a good idea. Yeah, it is. Absolutely. It is. That's what it is.
I've done that my fair share of times where I'm like, it wasn't that, but now it is, as I'm like frantically scribbling like this is now this. I think going back to it as another tip for like newer DMs is going through, and when you introduce anybody who's named or like anybody who's like of importance in your campaign, just write a little note. Like I have I use OneNote to organize my notes, so that way I'm able to use it on my laptop and on my desktop, and then also on my phone as I'm like coming up with ideas on the fly. And I have a page inside of my inside of like the folder for all my D&D stuff, and it's just named NPCs and just a tiny little bit about them. So it's like, okay, the captain of the guard in this village is now, his name is Edric, and that's the name I like randomly threw out. So when the players come back and they're like, hey, where's Edric? You're like, I don't know who Edric is. It's like, no, because they'll write down notes. Some of your players do at least, and they'll remember those names. And then it makes you seem like a much more prepared DM, and like maybe this guy actually knows a little bit more. Like for instance, like this is how I do mine. I'm looking at mine right now as I'm pulling it up. So it's like, okay, Carl Leone, he's the captain of the guard in Arkenheim. Roderick is the city captain, and then you have this named, and this is under like the village that the players are from. You have Giselle, who's the herbalist. The name of the inn that I had no idea of is it's the Black Pony Inn. You have the tower, which is the Mages Guild in parentheses, and then the leader of it in pound off it's like the All-Seer. And then you have Aelic, which is Lofric's head of retinue, and Lofric's like the noble of this area. And then Owain is the old warden, and Askarot is the new warden. And it's like, you just have that, like, just little bullet points. This is who they are, so when the players ask for it later, it's right there. And it takes no time as you're going through and you're doing the game of just like, switch to that tab real quick. Aelic is Lofric's head of retinue, and then that's all you need. And then you may never need it again. It may come back up.
Yeah, that just goes back to the point of like, don't over prepare needless information, because like exactly. I've done it before where I go through and I'm like, I gotta make this city like crazy. We've been preparing to get to the city for 20 sessions. I'm gonna literally flesh out 30 shops with their entire inventory, the shopkeeper's name, race, gender, background, visual descriptions, and
their
like
entire
then
family
I'm working,
tree.
yeah, and then I'm doing prep work for like 16 hours, and I'm like, this is starting to feel like a job. So I shouldn't be doing this. This is too much. And that's kind of where I stand on that. Do you have any other topics you'd like to discuss?
No, I think right there is a good natural wrapping up point for our first pilot episode of Roll for Banter.
Let's roll for banter.
Let's roll for banter. Yeah, we gotta figure something out for it. But audience, those who have stuck it all the way through, first off, major huge thank you for sitting through all the way to the end. If you'd like to see more of this content, let us know down in the comments. If there are any topics you would like us to discuss, talk about, anything that you have questions about, leave it down below. Let us know. We read those every single time, every comment, every little thing in our Discords and inside the comment section. Let us know.
Absolutely. Links to the channels, to TTRPGenius' channel will be in the description. Links to our Discords will be in the description. Links to our Patreons will be in the description, where you can find really cool extra content for your campaigns if you don't want to prep and make all these crazy stat blocks. We do all that work for you, so...
Yes, and encounters as well. We got you covered. Any of the things that we were just talking about, hint, hint, wink, wink, we're plugging now. Anything that... Yeah, the things that we talked about, those are things that Anthony and I are both able to do. We have a lot of free content over on our Patreons and in our Discords. Stop by, say hi, say that you found us on the Roll for Banter podcast, and we'll see you in the next episode.
See ya.